It is recording on Zoom.
All right, we're ready. Okay. Good evening, Portsmouth. This is the March 15th, 2023 Parking, Traffic, and Safety meeting. We're having an evening meeting. Normally we meet in the morning, but we do like to have a few evening meetings so that more people can attend these. Can we start with a call, the attendance roll, please?
Mary Lou McElwain.
Here.
Steve Pesci.
Here.
Mark Syracusa.
Here.
Harold Whitehouse. Erica Wygonik.
Here.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney.
Here.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan.
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
City Manager Karen Connard.
Here.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Here. And if we could see the financial report. Boy, I'm sure everybody can read that. It's in the packet, which is also on the city
Eric's
website.
about to make it bigger.
Yeah, let me get this.
Eric, do you mind scrolling down so we can see totals? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the financial report.
Seconded?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So now we're going to move to public comment. I will point out that there's a Woodbury presentation later, and there's a lot of changes, and there will also be a Woodbury neighborhood meeting on March 30th at New Franklin School again. So if you haven't seen the changes in the packet, your comments tonight may be not entirely up to speed. And with that, I'll open it up to public comment.
Mr. Chairman, if you could point out that people wanting to speak could come up to the seat next to Mary Lou and speak into the microphone,
Perfect.
Or they can use the podium.
or they could use the podium.
And if people are on Zoom, if you could raise your virtual hand and Eric will identify you. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Sandberg. I live at 160 Bartlett Street. About a year ago, I called in about the intersection about Bartlett and Islington. I find that light is not particularly pedestrian friendly. There's a lot of things that I think would be very easy to do, in my opinion, to make it a lot more pedestrian friendly. Right now, the interval is very long. It takes about 80 seconds after you press the button to get a walk signal. That's a long time. It really is. I mean, it may not seem a lot to you, but it is. And I don't know if you can change the interval to be faster so that you can get a walk signal faster. I would think that you could. And then probably more complicated is I don't understand why there's only 3 ways you can cross where if you're on the corner of where Two Brothers Garage is, seems like you should be able to cross straight Islington to get to CVS. Why wouldn't you be able to? Instead, if you're going to follow the crosswalk, you have to cross Islington and then you have to cross Bartlett and then cross Islington, which is pretty inconvenient. Why wouldn't you just be able to take the shortest route? Why shouldn't there be a crosswalk there as well? And then the reason why that's really important is because drivers who are turning right onto Islington from Bartlett, they actually don't know. There's actually no way for them to know that a walk signal is illuminated because you can't actually see any of the walk signals from your driver's from the dashboard because the one that's to your left is actually behind you. It's really like 190 degrees because of the way the road is configured. And so they wouldn't even know that the pedestrian crossing has priority if they were where the pedestrian is even there. So those are some things that I think would be easy to make the intersection more pedestrian friendly, and I would liked it to. And I mentioned this a year ago, and it didn't get on the agenda or anything. So please look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Good evening, Teacher Huda, 280 South Street. Just some comments and some questions. I'd like to thank Mr. Eby for the updates on the Woodbury project. After the last time's meeting, it looks like we've added some speed bumps. And my question would be on that, can we add any more? That's the first one. Next question is on Dennis Street. You're incorporating a temporary speed bump. The question would be, is this going to include signage? As it looks like the place where the speed bump will be is a slight hill, and you won't be able to see that till you get on top of it. So that's a question on that. And my last question is on Bartlett and Thornton, on the update of the temporary roundabout. Could you please update the residents on the cost of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Ferrer, Woodbury resident. I'll start by thanking you guys for the updates. I took a look at it. Looks good. I had some questions on more the implementation that could probably go into that actual meeting, but things like materials and like colors and stuff like that for visual cues to drivers in that vein, but I won't go deep into that now. I also think for bringing up the Market Street and the Daniel Street kind of stuff, that's something I've been long looking to somebody look at, and I know there's a lot of other improvements that will probably come in the future on the Market Square area, so I appreciate it, even looking at minor improvements such as right now. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Hi, everyone. Liza Hewitt, 726 Middle Road. I'd probably like to comment on the speed limit presentation, but there was no information in the packet about what would be presented, and the actual presentation follows public comment, which
We're
makes
going to have questions afterwards on
Okay.
the speed limit presentation.
on the speed limit presentation. Good, then I will wait and hear then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Matthew Glenn online?
Sure.
On Zoom?
Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, great. Matt Glenn at Harrison Ave in Portsmouth, and I want to speak on Sagamore. I really appreciate you looking at that opportunity to improve the shoulders at the crest of the hill on Sagamore Ave. I think that's really important. So many people are using that on bikes, and it's a really blind corner, blind top of the hill there. So I think that'll be a big safety improvement. I'm glad that the Red Boy seems to allow it. Thank you for doing that now when it makes sense with the road all torn up, or soon to be torn up. As far as Woodbury, I wanted to support your work to really listen to residents and consider different kinds of traffic calming. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that process. I also want to urge you to consider, you've got a very short 10-foot multi-use path under the 95 overpass, just to allow bicyclists to roll up before taking a left turn to head towards the Rockingham Bridge. If you can extend that path southeast towards Franklin Drive, I know you don't have as many residents screaming for traffic calming on that stretch of Woodbury, but in front of the Anchorage Inn right there, if you could widen that sidewalk, it really improves the connection, two-way connection to New Franklin School. And I think now is the time to do it. So please do consider that as part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Yep. Just up here next to Mary Lou. And we are going to have a Woodbury meeting on the 30th, so there'll be a chance to really get into it again one more time.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for the work that's being done by the city staff for coming out and having the first community meeting. I think it's really great. A lot of progress is being made. And I just want to say thank you for that. I did want to offer just one comment. In the latest proposal, the crosswalk that a bunch of the residents had requested was not included at Edmond Avenue. I think the city is collecting data on crossing right now. One side of the city street where the sidewalk ends isn't even plowed right now. I mean, you can't even walk on it. But I think that a better approach, I think if you build this and you include a crosswalk there, you'll see people use it. Right now, no one walks down that section of the sidewalk because there's no way to cross. So it redirects everyone to the crossing that's at Rockingham. So it's kind of like it's not used because it's a dead end and there's no way to get off it. I think if it is built, it'll be a heck of a lot safer. It would be the only way for people to cross to get to the school bus stop. And I think that really trumps all the numbers. I mean, we have to say to ourselves, look, if kids going to the middle school, this is the only way to get to their bus stop is to cross at this location, I think we ought to build it, no matter what the numbers actually show. And I think once it's built, people will use it. That's all. Thank you very much. And
Justin, could you just give your name for the record as well?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Justin Richardson, 586 Woodbury Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Yep.
Good evening, Annie Pugo, 160 Bartlett Street. Oh, am I close enough? Here we go. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you for moving the meetings. I don't know if it's going to be always in the evening from now on. No, okay, but it's nice. Thank you for this. And also for having meetings in our neighborhoods too, as I live on Bartlett Street. I'm a resident of Bartlett Street, and also I'm on the board of Seacoast Area Bicycle Riders, along with Matt, who just spoke earlier. So we want to thank you for the improvements on Sagamore Ave, and we're looking forward to Woodbury Ave. I ride my bike from Bartlett to Gosling Road for work almost every day, and I hope that the speed can be reduced a little bit there. So I'm looking forward to that. And my point, to follow what Jonathan said earlier, is regarding the bottom of Bartlett Street, at the intersection of Bartlett and Kate, or Auction Way, or whatever it's called now. I was wondering if I could have an update on the light. We were supposed to get a light at Precision Auto. Is that coming anytime soon? Anything to make this intersection more pedestrian friendly. Maybe a beg button for the flashing beacon. I understand it's a stop sign, but can we beg for the beacon, even if we don't have a beacon? So, yeah, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Anybody else on Zoom? Nope. All right, not seeing any other speakers. I'm going to close the public comment. And next on the agenda, we have the speed limit review progress report by speed limit working group members. And I'll just give a brief introduction. to what we're going to see. And we're not going to make any decisions tonight based on the presentation. And the team has been working on this presentation right up until this meeting. That's why it wasn't posted ahead of time. But it will be on the city website, and I have a feeling we'll be referring to it for a good long time after the presentation tonight. So first, I'll introduce the two committee members who are on the working group. Erica is a licensed civil engineer and certified road safety professional with nearly 20 years of experience in transportation planning. She's a Portsmouth resident and citizen volunteer on the PTS committee. And Steve has 35 years of experience as transportation and community planner in New Hampshire. In addition to serving on this committee as a Portsmouth resident volunteer, he also serves on the UNH and Durham traffic and safety committees. And they were greatly assisted by staff, especially Eric Eby and Tyler Reese. For the past several years, Eric and Steve had led a comprehensive speed limit overview working group. The goal of this group is to evaluate all of the streets and roads in Portsmouth to ascertain if the speed limits align with expectations and to make recommendations on adjustments if they're outside of the industry's best practices and standards. This is an enormous task and has required a great deal of time and resources. As you will see in this presentation, controlling speeds is a complex issue. The posted speed limit has only a limited effect, and speeds are inherently controlled more by road conditions and traffic calming measures, which are more costly and challenging to implement. By setting expectations and standards, we hope to have a better compliance with the posted speed limits. Tonight's presentation will review the overall progress, changes to date, suggested changes, and other ideas on a path forward to help make the streets of Portsmouth safer and address resident concerns. Please feel free to save any questions for the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to...
Just ask, can people hear back there? Something's wrong with the sound. It's not going through the room. Yeah.
Can you hear better now? Am I just too far from the mic?
Just,
My asthma is very bad today,
well,
so...
I think it's all of us, actually.
Maybe the
It just
speakers
doesn't
could
seem to be
speak.
loud enough for the room.
If the speakers can be mindful and speak as close to the microphone as possible.
That does help.
I'll belt it out. Maybe that's too loud. Haven't frequently been told to be quieter. Eric, can we put the slides up? I feel like this is awesome. We are a couple slides in.
Okay.
We already got our welcome.
Yes.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Councillor Bagley, for introducing this. My name is Erica Wygonik. I have quite a bit of professional experience in this topic. I spend an awful lot of time dealing with crash data and travel speeds and trying to address speed limits on roads throughout the country, as well as a personal interest in addressing this topic. I walk, I bike, I drive. I am acutely aware of our roads and how we experience our roads from all of those perspectives. And I bring all of that to this discussion, and hopefully that's helpful. As we go through this presentation, we've tried to organize it. There's a lot of content. We're going to try and move pretty fast so you're not bored, but not so fast that we gloss over things. So if you have questions, write them down. We'll get back to them later. Hopefully we've calibrated pretty well. As we move through, one of the ways we've organized this is there's slides that are blue, and that's the things we've done already, and then there's slides that are green, and those are things we're still working on, works in progress, things we're looking to get input on. So one of the first things that we want to share with you and that we worked on as a group was understanding what our goals were. We are tackling this topic for a number of reasons. We want speed limits that make sense. We want speed limits that are consistent, that follow the law. And we also want to make sure that all of our codes and signs align. Right now, it's a little bit of a mishmash of the code says one thing, a sign says another, the state might say something altogether. So we're working really hard to make sure that a pedestrian or a driver or a bicyclist experience on a roadway is safe, that it is appropriate, and that it is consistent throughout our city on roads of similar qualities. So why do we care about speed limits? That feels a little silly because I know everyone cares a lot, but speed limits are important because they ensure a safe road environment. However, on their own, they don't do that much to lower speeds. We tend to need to look outside of just the speed limit to be able to bring speeds down. Historically, speed limits have been determined really with only motor vehicles in mind and have really been driven by the 85th percentile, which is a whole technical thing I can get into, but I don't think is going to be that interesting. Now, this is a really big topic throughout the country and in our city, this idea of, well, vehicles aren't the only people using our roads, and we want to make sure our roads are appropriate for pedestrians, for bicyclists, and for neighborhoods. We want to have vibrant, vital neighborhoods where people enjoy being there, where people enjoy visiting with their neighbors and walking to the park, and feel safe driving and can get where they need to be when they're driving. It's not safe for a driver if they're not able to respond to bicycles and pedestrians that are using the roadway also. And so making sure that the speeds make sense for the given road is really important. Because speed limits on their own don't influence travel speeds as much as the road context, one of the things we're doing is trying to understand what speed a road should be posted at, and then working to change the road context and environment so that vehicles are driving that speed. We can't just go out and say, all right, 10 miles an hour, great. People aren't going to drive 10 miles an hour. You know, we need to make sure that the speed makes sense and is intuitive for drivers, but it's a complicated process that can be pretty iterative, where we try and lower the speeds, we try and adjust the road, and we may have to go back and do those things multiple times before we get to an environment that is what we're hoping for. As I mentioned, the streetscapes themselves really impact the travel speeds. So if we use these two roads as an example, we've got Marcy Street on the left and Borthwick Ave on the right. And these two roads have completely different environments. They have different streetscapes, they have different road functions, there's different amounts of pedestrian activity, shoulder widths, travel lanes, road alignments, curb cuts, right? Everything about the road environment here is very different. One feels very kind of constrained, and one is much more open. And those different environments lead to different travel speeds. And in this case, we're thankful because the different travel speeds also align with the posted speeds. There's some consistency here between what you would expect, what makes sense for the road, and what the posted speed actually is. That's not always the case, and sometimes, as I mentioned, it takes multiple attempts to get all of those things lined up. We wanted to cover a little bit of terminology. For better, for worse, there's a lot of different things that dictate travel speeds, speed limits, and are influenced by them, and ways to describe them. There's lots of rules and laws and ordinances, and then industry guidance. And so we wanted to just touch on all those so that everyone can be using the same terms and understand what they mean as we have this conversation. So the foundation for travel speeds comes from the New Hampshire state statutes and then the driver's manual, and the driver's manual is taking it from these state statutes, that ultimately it is the driver's responsibility to drive safely for conditions. Even if our roads were posted at 75, it's probably not safe to drive 75 on many of our roads, most of our roads. And so even if that was the speed limit, it wouldn't be legal because it's not safe. And so that's why you can't, you know, it's not a safe defense if you got into a car crash while I was driving the speed limit. Well, maybe that wasn't the appropriate speed at that particular time. So ultimately, that is a huge kind of foundation for all of this. And one of the things that I think is really nice about Portsmouth is we have a lot of situations where for people to feel like they're safe, they do feel like they have to drive slowly and appropriately slowly. Our downtown doesn't really have a speeding problem. People drive through the downtown of Portsmouth at a very slow speed because of congestion, because of pedestrian activity, because of the nature of the roads. And I think that's really good. We just want all of our roads to kind of have that same natural tendency for the driver. So another factor that comes into play in terms of this terminology is our city ordinance. So our city ordinance regulates speed limits in Chapter 7. However, not all streets have a limit in this ordinance right now. And if a street does not have a limit in the ordinance, it defaults to the state default speed limit. In most of our roads in town, that's 30 miles an hour. That's not, I think, 100% the case. 35 may also apply. But so any street that we care about what the speed limit is that isn't in this ordinance, one of the things we have tasked as a committee is getting them into this ordinance so that we can choose what we want the speed limit to be and it's not set at that state default. Another factor that is important here is that speed limits are subject to state law, and the state law outlines the rules for speed limit setting. So as I just referred to, there are default speed limits. If a street is not posted, there's a default state speed limit that applies. But this, the statute also provides guidance and rules for how speed limits can be set. And so we are not allowed in our state to post speed limits below 25. And to post them at 25, we have to have an engineering study that supports that posting. I think that's good for people to be aware of. If that's something you feel differently about, that's not something we as a committee can change. That's something that our state legislators would have to advance. But we do have to adhere to. Another important term is a posted speed limit. This posted speed limit is the speed limit that's on a sign, the signs that you see on the side of the road, and what most people think of as, that's the speed limit. However, those speeds don't always agree with the city ordinance or those state statutes that I was just describing. So trying to make sure all these things align is really important. We want one rule that applies to each road and not multiple rules that are in discordance. And so that's another aspect of what we've been trying to do, is trying to align all of those details. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who will talk about some of the things we've already accomplished.
Thanks, Erica. And one of the things, obviously, we noticed that as we've been looking at this over the past year or more, we know speeds come up frequently, almost every meeting, is there are a lot of these errors and omissions that have crept into the reality that we have. And it'll take quite a process to get this all ironed out, but we wanted to start by showing you what we've accomplished to date, if I could do that for a few slides. So at our last meeting, which was over at the Senior Center, you may recall that we decided as a committee to extend the review period for the posted 25-mile-per-hour speed limit on Islington Street. So Islington is really two portions, what I call inner Islington Street, which runs from Maplewood out to just beyond the US 1 bypass, and then the outer portion that runs out to Route 33. So both those were posted at 25, but different sections there. So we decided to continue the outer speed limit posting at 25 miles per hour until we circle back and make a recommendation to the council. And the inner speed limit is awaiting final approval from the council at 25. Next streets that we looked at were Middle Street and Middle Road. So on both of these streets, we lowered the speed limits to 25 miles per hour from the 30 mile per hour listing. Again, we discussed this at the last meeting regarding that staying in place at this time until we move forward with a further review. Next, several streets we want to talk about are changes, and these were ones that we found there had been errors and omissions. So Parrott Avenue, we lowered the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. That was one where it was an omission. And we all think, I believe we all feel that, that was a wise change and is waiting for formal council approval. Summit Avenue lowered to 25 from 30, again done last May, and awaiting formal approval by the council. So many times when we make these changes, they are put in place, and then X months later, the council will formally approve as a permanent change.
The changes we make are temporary until the council has.
Correct.
We don't make changes. We
We
advise on changes.
We advise
I
and
think.
recommend. Thank you.
So council gets final say. So that was a whole bunch of background on some of the work that we've been doing and how we're structuring this work. We are, I think, endeavoring to look at every street in town, although it is going to take us an awfully long time at the rate we're going, but we're trying so hard and working so diligently. Because every street in town is a pretty overwhelming process, we tried to identify a way that we could structure our approach and kind of provide some organization to this effort. So we're using the Complete Streets Design Guidelines as a starting point. When the City Council adopted the Complete Streets policy in 2013, the Council directed the staff to create a document, which is this document that's used to guide construction planning and funding to advance Complete Streets policies. So this particular guideline is a planning document. It's kind of like us, it's advising on what's the best way to proceed for various roads. And we leverage this guideline and its categories to provide some structure to this effort. So the first category we focused on was neighborhood connectors. We started here because this is our frequent flyer list. Like almost every road that comes up, or maybe not every road, but the roads that come up the most often, the roads that neighbors bring to our attention at our PTS meetings, the vast majority are in this category of roads. And so this was what we wanted to start with. One of the details in the Complete Streets Guidelines is each category includes a target speed. And so we started, as we were looking at this process, by looking at those target speeds. Target speeds are not legally binding. They're not in our city ordinance. They're not the posted speed. They're not the state statute. They're simply part of the planning process to say, what do we think makes sense for this particular type of road? And that's aligned with what we've been thinking about these about the speeds and the speed limits and the consistency that we'd like to achieve. And so we're using these target speeds as useful guidelines for our effort. However, as we looked at this, the target speed for the neighborhood connectors didn't align with how we think those roads should function or how many of them are actually what their current speed limits are. So as a first step, the target speed limit for this category was lowered to 25. And I think intuitively that if you think about the roads that are neighborhood connectors, that's many of the roads that we've talked about already tonight and that come up often in terms of these are places that people live. They tend to have pretty dense or denser residential development, but they are also roads that people use to get to other roads, but primarily neighborhoods. They're using these roads to get to neighborhoods. So they do have bicycle and pedestrian activity. They do have people using their roads as part of their neighborhood, and 25 really does seem to be the speed that made sense there. And so we moved to adjust that target speed down from 30 to 25. Back to Steve.
And I think that was, I don't want to let that slide under the radar. That was really a significant policy goal change that we're recommending, is that dropping that speed in that category by 5 miles per hour, because it's, as Erica said, it's what we've heard frequently from residents and constituents who come to our meetings.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Sure.
And that's not to say that every neighborhood connector is or should or will be posted at 25, but to say generally that category, that's what makes sense. And that's generally what we think most of those roads should work toward. And there are times where particular roads may not make sense to be posted at 25, but maybe they also don't make sense to be a neighborhood connector, right? So there's different things we might adjust, but overall, generally, that's what we thought was the most appropriate. Back to you, sorry.
Caveat being that we can set targets, but we still need to look at the individual situation of the street and the neighborhood that it's in. So let's look at a couple of the neighborhood connectors. We're always trying to make sure that the posted speed will align with the targeted speed, and we're focusing on improving compliance. I think nothing is more frustrating for everyone in the community when there is a mismatch between driver behavior and the posted speed limit that we have in place. So we're focusing on trying to make these matches. Woodbury Avenue is a good example. From Market Street to Rockingham Avenue, posted at 25, and obviously as we've been talking about the Woodbury Avenue design, we're talking about changes to design that will improve compliance with the speeds. Spinney Road is another one, posted at 25. We want to make sure that we can improve compliance on that street. Maplewood Avenue, another street that we want to call out between Woodbury Avenue and Dennett Street. I think here that we have a success that we should, point out that street was redesigned and reconstructed 2019-20, and I think that we've seen demonstrated success on that corridor. The community seems to feel that it's working better, and I think we want to replicate that success and the lessons that we've learned in that project. Next, we go on to neighborhood connectors. So this is one of the other categories.
Same category.
Sorry?
It's just one we haven't made a decision on yet.
Okay, thank you. What we're looking to do here on Rockingham Avenue is we are considering whether it is really more of a primary connector than a neighborhood connector. So, part of that process is looking at the street, looking at the speed data. So here's one where we are considering whether it should be changed and recommend to the council changing it to a primary connector. Next two streets that we want to call out are Farm Lane and Ranger Way, recommending changing classifications to neighborhood slow streets, which have a target speed of 20 miles per hour. So Farm Lane between Clover and Woodbury, and Ranger Way to change the entire Ranger Way to a neighborhood slow street with a target of 20. Several more that we want to call out. Recommended changing the classifications to neighborhood slow streets for McKinley Road, Hoover Drive, and FW Hartford Drive. So again, this would be more changing to neighborhood slow streets with a target of 20. Final set we want to talk about here are neighborhood connector streets. If I recall, these are not in chapter 7. Is that correct? So this is an example where we're trying to straighten out the publishing of the speed in the ordinance and the posting of the speed limit. So our staff has been out there collecting the speed data, and we are looking at adding Hodgson Way into chapter 7 and Miller Avenue. Also adding that into Chapter 7 as neighborhood connectors. Continuing on, here an example where for the neighborhood connectors we need to align the speed limits, the posted speeds with the RSA guidelines. So Kearsarge Way is posted at 20. That needs to be looked at for a change, as well as Greenleaf Avenue posted at 20 miles per hour. Okay. And then we will look at two more. Farm Lane from Clover Lane to Route 16 posted at 20, and Cottage Street right now also posted at 20 miles per hour. Again, we need to review this in terms of compliance with the RSA and putting in our ordinances correctly. South Street, obviously a very critical street in Portsmouth. We need to review this corridor in its entirety. I think we all know that there are many different aspects to South Street as you move from the south end west through the city. Technically, the RSA would require a 25 mile per hour minimum. Our city guidelines for a neighborhood connector street are 25 miles per hour. You can see the speed data that we have collected. So with its current posting at 20, we need to put some time into thinking about what can be done to bring that into a coordinated state. And obviously, many aspects to deal with on South Street.
You get to do
Oh,
this one.
I get to do a blue slide for a change. Thank you. So I guess we wanted to just kind of summarize what we've done to date. So we lowered the neighborhood connector speed, target speed from 30 to 25 in the city's street design guidelines. We have lowered or recommended that the council formally approve lowering the speed limits on Islington Street from Maplewood Avenue to Spinney Road, as well as Parrott Avenue, to align with the neighborhood connector target speeds and engineering standards. We've initiated speed limit reduction trials on Islington Street, the outer Islington part from Spinney to Route 33, and on Middle Road, along with the installation of an RRFB at the Riverbrook condos, which was a community request. And then Middle Street from south to Congress Street, we've lowered also from 30 to 25 miles per hour.
So we're not quite done the neighborhood connectors, but we've made a lot of progress there, and we're focusing in on those last few things that need to get adjusted. Our next focus is going to be on the primary connectors. That's the next category that we think makes sense to look at. As you can see from the next slide, the speed limits for the primary connectors are all over the place. The actual speeds do not align at all with the posted speeds, and most drivers, the vast majority, are exceeding the limits. That's not what we want in our speed limits. We want really none of the things I just said to be true. We want consistent speed limits, we want people adhering to those speed limits, and we want those speed limits to make sense. So we think this category is really important to tackle, but it's going to be really tricky to address all of these issues on all of these roads, which have a lot of diversity to them. But we're not daunted. We're going to try. I think last but not least for me, we're also examining the potential for a citywide default speed limit. I think it's something that would be, it's attractive in terms of its simplicity, but we do have to make sure that if we do that, it's legal, and the legal department is helping us identify what would be required to do something like set a citywide speed limit. So I'm going to turn it back to Councillor Bagley.
Great, thank you for the excellent presentation. I think, as you can see from that presentation, there's a lot of complexity to this topic. I will just highlight what we typically do in parking, traffic, and safety is we will implement things on something of a trial basis, and then every 6 months or every year, the council will formally approve things. So in the presentation, when you saw that, it was waiting a council approval, it's not because we don't want to approve it as a council, it's because we give it kind of a trial timeline before we do approve it, in case there is some feedback from the community that maybe we made a mistake.
Sorry, we weren't trying to throw you under the bus.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Language is very prickly on all this stuff, so thank you. Yes.
Mary Lou?
Yes, I would just like to acknowledge the long hours and hard work that both Erica and Steve have put into this presentation. It's really wonderful. It's so informative to everyone in the community. So great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mary Lou.
And
To that point, we will add it to, we'll put it on the city website.
Yes, please. And I think I just want to, one final thought is that, this will be a long process. I mean, there are a lot of pieces to ravel and unravel in this, and I expect that we'll be continuing to kind of comprehensively look at this and be frequently on agendas with next step recommendations.
As a group, Steve and Erica, how long have you been working on this?
Mark through the chair.
I don't want to know.
The first draft of this presentation was done in April of last year. So it's gone through, this is version
This is
like
just the
35.2. I
this
don't know.
presentation,
A
so.
lot of time and hours.
Yeah.
in it.
It's
But there'll
been a
be
long
35 more until we get it done.
You volunteered to do this, so that's.
They did.
All right, do we have any more
Very appreciative.
questions from the committee? All right. I'm going to open it up to the public to come up, if you come up to the microphone. And you just need to get, oh, thank you.
Woodbury Ave, 633 Woodbury Ave. So I guess,
Excuse me.
oh, okay, nobody can hear. I know, I don't like having my back to
I
the
know.
You can stand at the podium if you like. You can use it.
Yeah, you could stand at the podium if you'd rather.
So I guess when you say people from the community requested it was a community request, how many people need to request something before is it like one person said, oh, this is not working for me, it's too fast, so, or is it 30 or 40?
Do you mean how many people
How
have to
many
request
people, when you
a
say
speed
it's
limit
a community
change?
request, how many people make up this
Mr.
community
Chairman,
request?
I would,
I could speak
yeah.
to that. These folks are volunteers. They're not
But they're
necessarily.
preparing the information based
Sure.
on the
So they're-
information that's given to them, is that correct?
Well, they're preparing the information based on guidelines, the review of existing data. The process with which traffic calming and speed controls and changes in configuration of the roadway
Yeah.
starts with a request to the city. It
From a
comes in.
single individual? or-
It can be a single individual.
Okay.
And the process happens that we receive a concern. It can either come through the committee or directly to the Department of Public Works. Eric Eby, our transportation engineer, and our folks, Tyler Reese, review the comment. Oftentimes, there leads to collection of data, and if there's determined to be an issue, solutions, either short-term solutions, easy, putting a sign up or painting, can be done. If it's a larger solution, a larger change, I can point to an example. We had a request to change a section of roadway from a two-way street to a one-way street. It came in with a limited number of people being interested in doing that, and when we went to public presentation relative to that, there was a hue and cry from a lot of people saying, you didn't ask us.
Well, that's what,
So what happens is it's an iterative process. So if there's a significant change to a roadway or something like that, there's a public dialogue. And if there's a consensus, meaning a majority of people are for it, or if there's an overwhelming safety concern that we, as professional engineers, determine to be overwhelming in terms of concern, it can move forward. Sometimes it takes money to do that. So we would then go to the city council, either through our operating budget or through a capital improvement plan request, and it would be requested for monies to implement that. A great example is traffic calming efforts on various streets. There's an item in the capital improvements plan that sets aside money to do that activity, and once there's a consensus in the neighborhood on an approach, we do that. Sometimes there isn't consensus, and sometimes what we do is a pilot effort. A great example of this is the roundabout that we're going to be doing that somebody who commented earlier said, what's the status of that, what's it going to cost? There are costs associated with doing these pilot efforts, but the benefit is that you gain information about that. People get a chance to kind of kick the tires, they kind of get a chance to see the configuration, and modifications can get done real time based on real experience. So it is not just one person saying, I want to change this, and it happening. It's a exhaustive process that reviews a lot of public input and a lot of different steps along the way. So it doesn't just happen.
And thank you, Peter. That's a great explanation. I'll just add one more point to that. So any citizen is welcome to contact the council or Public Works or this committee with a suggestion, and then what we'll do is look into it. But very often what happens is we look into it and we don't recommend a change, and we place that suggestion on file. So anybody's welcome to bring something to this committee. However, just because something's brought to this committee doesn't mean an action would be taken.
I would think, yeah.
No,
Well,
they're
it's
just
more of a-
highlighting.
it's like a
what it is
flagging,
if-
right? Like somebody
yeah.
can flag something,
Yeah.
and that's it just takes one person to flag something. Maybe that doesn't mean it takes one person to change something.
Right.
I guess is maybe a
certainly
good
hope
way
not,
to
because
describe
that
it.
would-
That person
Yeah.
one person might flag something that, staff collect data and we're like, yeah, this is a problem. We discuss it as a committee and then a change might occur, but it's not, that's, one person can flag something and that can be a valid concern.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to add, there's one other step that we frequently do is we will go out to the site as a committee and we will look at it ourselves. And I've been on the committee for, 4 or 5 years, and many times items are raised, we collect data, and we go out and visit the site, and we determine, we think in the scheme of larger things and context, it's fine, and that it gets placed on file for future review. So I think we've become very methodical at how we look at issues that are raised by residents that come to the city, and I think what we presented tonight is part of that.
Erica?
Sorry.
It's okay.
And just to circle back to the speed limits that we're talking about, as a Parking and Traffic Safety Committee, we see every month many requests for traffic calming and speed limit reviews. And that happens month after month after month, and happened month after month after month, to the point where we thought as a committee it would make sense for us to start tackling this in a systematic way instead of just waiting for people to bring it to the committee, and instead of one road and then this road and then that road, and it's dependent on that one citizen speaking up. Instead, we wanted to be proactive and thoughtful and systematic and look at all the roads. We can't do them all at once, and so in terms of trying to figure out a way to carve out a manageable task at a time, we picked one of these categories, and we did intentionally pick a category that has roads that come up a lot to try and help get some useful progress that would help areas of concern.
So then another question I had was, did you raise the, recommend raising the speed limits on any roads? Or did you just lower them across the board? And the additional question is it realistic? I mean, people are driving faster and faster. Main highway speed limits are 75 miles an hour, I think. I think that's what they are. We're still at 65. No one drives 65 miles an hour, and they are usually in control. There are accidents, of course, but I don't drive 65 miles an hour on the highway.
Well, we don't control the highway as a city.
No,
that is a state
I
road.
understand. I'm not
And
suggesting
generally
it's 75.
speaking, we have a lot more resident requests for slower speed than we do for faster speed.
I
so
understand,
we've
but is
only
it
tackled
realistic? I'm just-
where we can lower the speed thus far.
You're going to be, the police department is going to be very busy.
Well, I
It's been
think
very busy.
Is that okay if I?
Yeah.
That's really something that we talked about in the presentation, that we can't just lower speeds. It's not as simple as saying,
I know you
hey,
can't, but you're making recommendations, and then the
But-
council
Yep.
will.
Okay.
vote
So
on it.
Okay, we're gonna-
I just wanted to see if anybody else has any questions.
Oh, okay. Can I
I-
just ask one more quick one? Why is Rockingham is a connector road to a neighborhood connector? What neighborhoods does Rockingham connect? Rockingham goes out to the highway.
The classifications are not, we just use terms that
Connector
made
road,
sense,
connector-
but the classifications are based on a number of criteria.
All right, okay, then I don't know. So the answer to that is whatever.
I think that's one we're looking at reviewing.
It's not a connector road, it's a very short street, so.
Oh, anybody else have questions?
Liza Hewitt, 726 Middle Road. I want to thank you for the presentation. It was obviously well thought out, easy to follow. I guess one recommendation I would make if you're going to do further presentations like this would be to give more examples of the streets when you're referring to things like primary connectors, connector roads. You guys know them inside and out, but the public does not, and they don't necessarily have access to that book that has them in there. So that's just
Good
one
point. Thank you.
recommendation. The other thing about the presentation, I was confused with the Borthwick, the example that you gave at 35. And maybe it is 35 and it's not posted as such, but that road is posted. The signs are 25 miles per hour, I believe, from 33 to about the hospital. I think it's also 35 somewhere, but you might want to look at that before you use that as an example, because I don't know that that's the best example to use. So I'm, you're not going to be surprised by this. I'm all in favor of a city default speed limit. I think it's very hard to drive this city and to know what the speed limits are, to go from, I know Middle Road well because I live there. But when that was 30 miles an hour and half the streets that are feeding into it are 20 miles an hour, like Essex and Sheffield, and then the other half that feed it are 25 miles per hour. I mean, how do you even know what you're supposed to be driving, because they're all over the place? I also hope that you will use, I know the 85th percentile, and after speaking in front of you enough, you probably know my feelings on using the 85th percentile as a gauge for where the speed limits should be in people's neighborhoods. But I'm wondering whether you're going to be using the number of accidents in those neighborhoods as well. I can only speak on Middle Road. When Middle Road was 30 miles per hour, there were accidents. There was a gentleman almost hit in the crosswalk. There were multiple accidents as far as traffic accidents with cars. And I think that needs to be looked at, because when you look at the data on Middle Road, I realize that the speed has not reduced that much, which I know was disappointing to me and some others. But the accidents, I believe, were reduced. And I think you need to look at that. And I think that's every bit as important in neighborhoods as some of the other factors that you're looking at. And then just my last would be kind of maybe something more structured as far as when these go to City Council for approval. Because I know in the case of Middle Street, I mean, that decision was made quite a while ago. I'm not sure. I think it was more than a year ago when you took the bike lanes out, and it was recommended through that study that it go to 25, but yet it still hasn't been reduced to 25 as ordinance with the City Council. And it just feels like to let those go on. The same thing happened with South Street between South and Middle. It took almost 2 years, I believe, for that to go to the council after the decision was made to reduce it. There was no longer a pilot. You had already done the pilot. And I wonder if you make a decision to reduce, for instance, Islington and Middle, you will have already had a year's pilot. Will you then sit for another 2 years and wait for it to go to council for ordinance change if you decide to do that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So, thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment. There are, for folks who are interested in seeing what their streets are listed as from, the type of category, there's a complete streets document online in the city's website. If you type in complete streets guideline, it'll go right to that section. So there's some good resources there. This presentation will be posted on the website as well.
Mr. Chairman, in defense of the wonderful presenters, I think the list of streets that made up each category was in an earlier iteration, or at least in a draft way back when, and I think we, in the interest of consolidating the information, we can certainly make that available as well, as Peter said, through the report.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for the tremendous amount of work that went into that presentation, both by both of you and by help from staff. So moving on to new business, Daniel Street request for lighted flashing stop sign at Market Square by resident. Sample motion would be moved to place on file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And I'll just, for the person who made this request, we are doing a comprehensive overview of Market Square, so we don't want to get involved in making changes prior to that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Old business, Woodbury Avenue, request for traffic calming by residents. Sample motion moved to hold additional public meeting to present revised plan incorporating speed cushions, and I believe that's on March 30th.
I believe so. So I would, Mr. Chairman, I move to do that, but also to give a brief review on the modifications that have been made, because there are a number of folks here this evening, and the committee it'd be good for the committee to hear this as well.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay.
Okay. I'll bring it up on the screen, the revised plan. Okay, so that's the entire length.
There you go, clear as day.
There, yeah, I can see that.
And I can
Any
zoom in on this. All right, moving on to the first page. This is starting at the end, at the Echo Avenue end of the corridor. And
Can you
blow it up a
can you
little
blow it up a
yep,
little bit?
let me try here.
Get your plus minus up top.
Yeah. Is that better?
It's better.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had the neighborhood meeting at the Franklin School back in February, and we had presented a plan showing a lot of median islands along the corridor. And those islands would help to divert traffic out of the straight alignment that they are in currently on Woodbury. But we did get a lot of feedback from the residents. You know, they were concerned about the loss of parking, having median islands being difficult to get in and out of driveways. And so we took another look, and you know, the speed tables were a high priority for the residents. So we looked at this and went back and saw, you know, there is another option. Usually on arterial roadways such as Woodbury Ave, speed tables are not recommended. But I looked into that further, and the reason they're not recommended on arterial roadways is because generally arterial roadways carry a lot of truck traffic. But on Woodbury, there is a truck restriction, prohibition, so there is not very much truck traffic. Another characteristic of arterial roadways is that they carry a lot of bus traffic. But on Woodbury, again, there's not a lot of bus traffic. It's just a Wildcat bus that runs between Maplewood and Market Street. And again, another reason for not doing traffic calming on arterial roadways is that it can force traffic onto side streets that parallel the roadway. But in this area of Woodbury, there are no parallel side streets as an option. It's either this or basically Market Street or the Turnpike. So a speed table can be appropriate in this situation. So what we looked at, speed tables are also a concern to emergency vehicles, because with speed tables such as Maplewood Avenue, it affects all vehicles. Even emergency vehicles have to slow down, which is not desirable when responding to an emergency call. So another device that's used in traffic calming is what is called and referred to as a speed cushion or a speed pillow. And it's these units that are, instead of one solid speed table across the roadway from curb to curb, it has gaps in it. And each separate cushion is 6 feet wide, and then there's a 2-foot gap between them. And what this does is allows the trucks with larger wheelbases, such as fire trucks and ambulances, they can traverse the speed bump through the gaps, so they don't have to slow down as they approach the gap. They can go right through the gaps. But as a regular passenger car or pickup trucks with smaller wheelbases, they would have to have at least one tire up on the speed bump, so slowing them down. So with that in mind, and they're also more advantageous because of the gaps. It allows for better drainage and allows for motorcycles and bicycles to get through them easier without having to go up and over the hump. So we took another look at the corridor and see where we could make these changes. And starting here at the left end of the corridor closest to Market Street, where Echo Ave is, we are still recommending a median island at this location at Echo Ave, because one of the reasons it acts as a gateway into the neighborhood. We could add greenery or signs saying "Welcome to Frank Jones Neighborhood," for example. And also a lot of the people who live at Betty's Dream come up Echo Avenue, and they are in wheelchairs and crossing the road to get to Rite Aid or Market Basket. And this would be a good way to give them a pedestrian refuge halfway across the street. allowing them easier access to cross. And so that's why we are recommending median island at that location. And in some places, we are still recommending eliminating on-street parking, but that's only so that the vehicles would have to stay in the travel lane and not use the parking lane as a bypass to the median or the speed cushion. So this is the first speed cushion is shown here, and the reason we have them, we have 6 total speed cushions, and they're spaced about every 400 feet apart. Studies have shown that this type of spacing keeps the speeds at a constant 25 miles an hour. Rather than getting through one traffic calming device and then seeing no more, traffic tends to pick up and make up for lost time. So if they can see the next item 400 feet away, they know, oh, there's another one, there's no point in speeding up, I'll just keep a steady speed going through this area. And so that's the first one. Let's see if I can carry this out. And that is, then we come to the intersection of Maplewood Avenue. There is an existing median island and a flashing beacon at this crosswalk at the Maplewood Ave intersection, so that would stay as is. And moving on to the next sheet. Where are we? That's the median island at Maplewood Avenue with the flashing beacon, and the next speed cushion was proposed just to the other side of Maple Street. And again, there wouldn't be any parking changes needed for this. It can be fit right in as the existing geometry of the street. Moving on to the third page, the next speed cushion is down near Farm Lane in front of the church. And again, this is an area where we are recommending taking away the parking lane so that vehicles cannot get around the speed cushion by using the parking lane. The other option, if parking really needs to stay here, is we could just widen the speed cushion out into the parking lane so that people would not be able to avoid it. The next sheet, this is a proposed speed cushion down, the church is here to the left, and Edmund Ave to the right. There would be 2 speed cushion locations in this area. And again, no parking would be lost by either one of these locations. And the final sheet in this section, again, that's the one we saw on the last sheet at Edmund. And then there's a median island proposed for this area here, just to the northwest of Rockingham Avenue. And the reason this provides a gateway treatment into the neighborhood, again, for greenery or signage to alert drivers that they're coming into a neighborhood. And at this area, we would propose to eliminate some of the parking just to eliminate the ability to easily get around the median. It would force people to slow down as they're coming into this area. The rest of the plan is similar as we had shown it before, with the proposed crossing and median island on the other side of Rockingham Ave and the connector to the Pease Rail Trail. And the next sheet.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Eric a question since we're on that slide?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
Eric, can you speak to why we're not currently depicting a sidewalk crossing at Edmund?
At Edmund, yes, we've looked at the location. This committee went out 6-7 years ago, and we actually looked at it and collected data at that time in the summertime, first week of school. And then we put a camera out again last week, and we've been collecting data. We've got 85 hours of data out here. And as a rule of thumb, you'd like to see at least 20 pedestrians an hour in some hour of the day. But those 85 hours, we didn't see 20 pedestrians in the entire intersection for an hour. I mean, we have pedestrians mostly walking along the sidewalk on Woodbury. We get a few, 3 or 4 or 5 a day that will cross the street here. And primarily that's students going to the bus and getting the bus stop. Other than that, most pedestrians are walking along. So even if you looked at every pedestrian that's using that intersection, that's still less than 20 an hour, which is not a high number of pedestrians. It's not a lot of pedestrian traffic. We do have an existing crosswalk here at Rockingham. It's only a couple hundred feet away. And I feel that it's safer to have a pedestrian crossing at this intersection rather than to introduce a new one where it's not going to get a lot of activity. And, pedestrian crosswalks generally don't get a lot of vehicles to yield to them when there is a light pedestrian activity at them. So it's...
As a follow-up, when the city undertakes the improvements to Edmund Ave, which will include sidewalks, as part of the capital improvement plan? Is this something we could revisit if that were
I-
appropriate?
Yes, we could certainly take another look at it. With the proposed median island here and the speed cushion at this location, the speed should drop substantially within this area, making it easier for pedestrians to cross the street at this location. So that's something we can continue to monitor after the implementation, see how it's doing.
Question.
Mary Lou?
How many stops does a school bus make on this whole section? Do you know?
I do not know.
When the
Where
answer,
do they
it
stop?
would depend, correct?
Yeah, it depends from year to year where the students are living and
Well-
yeah.
Usually, they don't stop at every house.
No.
So I'm wondering if they stop at, say, Edmonds Avenue.
Mhm.
And, parents might be requesting a crosswalk there because kids are coming to and from
Mhm.
Woodbury with
Yep.
a school bus. Just wondered if that was part of the consideration. of
Yeah, that's
crosswalks.
part of the thinking is, because it's a bus stop for students,
Right.
the one advantage you have when the bus stops, it puts out the stop sign to the side and stops all traffic, and then the students can cross,
More or less.
which is, I would consider that to be safer than any crosswalk because it's stopping traffic.
Yeah, I just wondered if that was part of the consideration, is to see,
Yeah.
to know how many stops the school bus makes and where they stop.
Yeah, we could find that from the school department.
Mr. Chairman.
Mark?
Okay. My general understanding is they do stop, and individual children do get off at their houses instead of one location.
I think it depends on the neighborhood.
Well, on Woodbury Ave,
Oh, specifically.
specifically on Woodbury
If
Ave.
this is, Mr. Chair, if this is something of interest, we could talk to the school department to have a
Yeah.
briefing.
Okay.
We can't speak to this.
Just curious, that aspect of crosswalks.
Well, nope, let's just continue and,
Okay, so this sheet shows the proposed improvements at the Dennett Street intersection, which is a raised median here in front of the hotel. And this would be keeping sidewalk basically in what alignment is here, but, adding a bike lane to the side here. So it's just reinforcing the slowing down as the traffic comes into this section of Woodbury. Yeah, that was, and for this is a detailed specification of what the speed cushions will look like. Again, it's a set of three going across the road. This is one lane. This is the double yellow down the middle of the road. You have traffic on one side, traffic on the other. Each one would have a full cushion, and then there's one split between the two. So it's a 6-foot wide cushion with 2-foot gaps in between. So emergency vehicles would be able to drive through the gaps, whereas regular passenger cars would not be able to.
great, thank you, Eric. And if anybody in the crowd has questions, feel free to send them in to us via email, or once again, on March 30th, we're going to have another meeting where there's going to be a little bit more open dialogue on this presentation and any modifications to it. So all those in favor of scheduling the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Not opposed. Okay, moving on. B, Dennett Street, request for traffic calming by residents. Sample motion move to approve temporary bump out on north of Spearhawk Street. And that's shown in the packet.
Yes. And that is this diagram here. So based on the data we've collected, and we've done sight lines measurements out there of the hill, which is just near Hunters Hill Avenue, we felt that if we could do something to break up the straight alignment of Dennett Street coming up the hill from Sparhawk Street, that may help to slow traffic down as they're coming up to this intersection where the sight lines are more limited. This could be done by inserting those plastic flex bollards at this location and restriping the middle of the road. It would, cut over into the parking lane here a bit, but, each residence does have an off-street driveway where they can park. This would be something we would recommend as a temporary measure, just to see how it works. We could put that out and monitor speeds while it's in place. And it's at a location where when you're coming over the hill, you'll be able to see it in time. That's why we didn't want to bring it too close to the top of the hill where you may not be able to see it coming from Maplewood Ave. But at this location, it is visible from both directions.
Okay.
Did anybody make the motion?
Motion to move temporary bump out north of Sparhawk Street.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. Is this very similar to what we did in front of the White Heron Tea Company when we did temporary bump out
Yes, but
there?
there wouldn't be a crosswalk. It would just be
Right.
a bump out. Yeah.
Right, with the bollards?
Yeah. Oh, well, that didn't shift lanes. That just kept the lane closed until you got past it. Whereas this was actually going to force drivers to shift their behavior.
Shift over,
Yeah.
okay. And that will be for 6 months, or what's the time frame?
We could set a, you know, I would say at least a month, you know, see how it goes, and we would.
Spring.
Mary Lou, the production folks have said, put your mic closer to you when you talk.
I'm the one who was criticizing that.
It's okay.
I'm not going to
Trying to
ask
help
all over
Kevin out.
again. I'm not going to ask all
No,
over
you're
again.
good.
I will vote in support of this, Mr. Chairman. However, I do want to make sure we adequately advise residents that are out there and that have requested this, so that they're aware that this is going to happen and it's a pilot effort and that we are using this to collect data to see the response. I can imagine some people getting upset that a decision is being made to make modifications and not feeling there was adequate review. So I know it's just a pilot, but I still, in order to optimize the potential success, I would like to add that we would do additional outreach prior to implementing this.
I would agree with that, especially the residents' driveway who's most affected. I think we should make sure we contact them ahead of time. Erica?
Do you think that we would need to let them know and talk about it next month, or do you think we could outreach with postcards or phone calls, or and do it before next month? I think you have wisdom here. I want to support.
Yeah, I
your
know.
wisdom.
I think probably a leaflet put on doors would probably be the best way for those immediate impacted folks. And then, once we do it, we'd put signboards up saying, temporary pilot, change of traffic flow or something like that.
Mark?
Now I'm in the position of making a friendly amendment, but I don't want to. It seems like we have to do a little information to the public, there's more surrounding neighbors, but then we're going to get feedback from them on what we're going to do. So if they didn't go to the site visit and they don't know about it today or right now, and then we approve this just for a pilot, but before the pilot we put out notices, I would think that the public that we just notified is going to want to have more input. It's just a thought.
So I'm not quite clear on what the friendly amendment is.
There isn't one.
Don't do the outreach, or do additional outreach.
I think it's the buggy before the horse. It seems like we should be doing outreach before we introduce the pilot.
That was my motion.
Okay. So the friendly motion would be exactly what Peter said. There's no friendly motion.
And the second would agree.
Okay.
So
That's it.
I think if we got an overwhelmingly negative response, you might bring it back before the committee before proceeding. Is that what you're?
Yeah, we've learned a lot over the years in terms of how to roll stuff out. And one of the things we've learned is that, listening to the residents are the ones that have to live with this, and their input is extremely important. So, we try to do this in a manner that's inclusive as possible and make sure people are aware of it. They may not like it or agree with it always, but they're at least aware that it's happening. It's appropriate for us to do an outreach, and if we get serious feedback, we'll come back and say we got a lot of really negative feedback, or if people wanted to do something different. But I think we'll see. It's a pilot. It's not a permanent thing. We did a pilot on Bartlett Street. People didn't like it, so it really informed some of the decisions that were made relative to design. So that's kind of the process. As Erica said, it's an iterative process.
And no matter how much outreach we do, until the stakes go in the ground, there's still going to be people that don't know about it until it happens. So you can't notify everyone. Or you can try to notify everyone, but not everybody will understand what they've been notified about.
Yep.
So right now, we're voting on
Proceeding with this pilot, but doing outreach prior to that time, and if there's significant feedback relative to the effort, we'll come back to the committee.
Good.
If not, we'll report back when we're going to implement.
Okay. I'll second that.
Oh, we already seconded it.
Well, it seems like there were changes within that.
Well, there was, but.
That's okay. We'll take a vote
Any
now.
further discussion? Steve?
I'm going to support the revised motion, but the measure of success here will be increased compliance with the posted speed. Is that where we're going?
I think that is a good measure of success.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on. C, Sagamore Avenue, request to slow traffic by resident. Sample motion, move to approve installation of additional speed limit sign and speed feedback sign as detailed in the packet.
So moved.
Second.
I don't know if there's anything to say about this one, or pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we collected data along Sagamore Ave. We saw the speeds are slightly above the posted speed limit out there. So is some measures that we could do to help bring it into compliance is install another speed limit sign near the Tide Watch driveway, and, as well as a speed feedback sign to let drivers going out of the town know how fast they're going. We have that coming inbound, but nothing outbound at that location. So
Great,
we could add that and monitor it.
And Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is some information relative to road work that we'll be doing, that Tyler Reese will be presenting, I believe. Is it Tyler or you?
Nope. Zach.
Zach.
Do we have
I'm
a
sorry,
motion?
Zach.
You need a
Why don't
motion?
should we finish this motion before we do that?
Yes.
All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so new business, Sagamore Avenue, update on cross-section improvement project.
Welcome, Zach.
Hi all, I'm Zach Cronin, the Assistant City Engineer. I am the project manager of the Sagamore Ave Sewer Extension Project. As part of the project, we were disturbing the road, so we saw it as a very good opportunity to also improve the cross-sectional area. We had a number of constraints that we are still dealing with and working around, but the overall goal is to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle safety on Sagamore Ave. If we could bring up. Should we go across left to right, or?
Sure, from the Tide Watch end over.
Yes. So the first phase of Sagamore roadway reconstruction really happened in 2015, which went from about South Street to Tide Watch. The goal of this is to bring up the rest of Sagamore Ave to about the same safety standards and cross-sectional area that that first phase had established. So starting over about Tide Watch is where we would begin, establishing wider sidewalks and realigning the roadway to straighten out and widen the existing, or the shoulders, and have uniform widths as well as uniform roadway widths. That is to improve the ability of maintaining sidewalks as well as the roadway surface. As it stands now, the southbound shoulder can shrink down to approximately 1 foot, which is very dangerous for bicyclists. And the far side, that shoulder can get about, I measured it at about 10 feet in one location. So what happens there is bicyclists will use the farther out location, and then where it narrows in, they overcorrect into the traffic lane, causing vehicle, conflicts. And also pinching in with that, you can have times where bicyclists hit the curb and it causes accidents.
Eric, can you slide back to the Tide Watch entrance?
Yes, so Tide Watch, we are proposing removing the acceleration and deceleration lane. We've had a number of complaints from the residents of Tide Watch due to stormwater coming down off of the hill. This would allow us to use the curb to channelize that flow and redirect it away from their entrance, as well as improve the grading so it would prevent any water from running into there. I have spoken to the former and current association president for those condominiums, and their consensus was that this was a plan that they were in favor of, but they were going to speak to the rest of the association as well. And I'm waiting to hear back on that. So this is more a preliminary plan that, in the interest of schedule, I wanted to bring forward. But it is a work in progress, and we are able to make alterations as input comes through. I would like to note that the work that is proposed is within the city's right-of-way. There are some impacts with existing landscaping and other features that we are speaking with residents about to try to find equitable solutions. So moving, across as we see, it will uniformly change the lane width to 11 feet in both directions. As we've heard a couple of public commenters state, the top of that hill is a very narrow pinch point. In other areas, we're looking for 6-foot shoulders on either side, with one side having a 5.5-foot sidewalk, which would be adequate width for our sidewalk tractors for maintenance. At the top of the hill, we're looking to do 4 foot of shoulder on each side of the road, which we believe is the best mix of maintaining a proper shoulder width on either side and vehicle safety as well. The work would then continue all the way through down to around where the scuba shop is, where the bridge construction in 2015 established nice roadway cross-section as well as a concrete sidewalk. So we would continue the concrete sidewalk from that construction to the 2015 work on Sagamore Ave on the north and also 2015.
Great, thank you. This, I think, many residents have been waiting for this presentation for quite some time, so I think it's going to be well received.
Great. We've had many cyclists come to our meeting requesting wider bicycle lanes and safety improvements, so this is great. Good job.
Thank you.
So far, so good, right?
Thank you.
And that's informational, so we don't have to take any action.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And the monthly accident report from the Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the month of February, we had a total of 76 crashes. 37 of those were reportable crashes. We had zero instances of either a pedestrian or a bicyclist being struck by a motor vehicle. I did want to just mention a quick point that somebody had actually made a good point in public comment earlier about crash data as it relates to speed limits. That's one of the big factors that we look at in addition to complaints we get about speed. Allocating resources is one of our primary goals, is to reduce the amount of crashes and reduce the amount of crashes that cause injury. And a lot of times the crash data supports us increasing traffic enforcement errors in areas where we don't get complaints. So although we may get a lot of complaints on a certain road about speeding, when we look at the crash data, it may tell us to patrol the street over one. So I just think it's important for the public to understand that the police department takes all those factors into consideration, and crash data is one of those important factors as well. And again, just to reiterate, the crashes aren't always on the roads that we typically get the most complaints about speed on. So that's why we're policing and enforcing it in other areas of the city as well, in addition to where we're hearing public requests for assistance. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And
Question.
Yep.
Could you give us a report on a pedestrian accident that happened this month, maybe within the past 10 days, when a child was hit?
Yep.
I don't need a name, but I would like to know information on it, please.
If I may, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair? Sure. Yeah, it was, what month is it now? It's March. It was probably about 2 weeks ago. We had a motor vehicle versus pedestrian accident at the intersection of Congress and Maplewood Avenue. It's probably about 4:45, 4:45 at night. There was a vehicle in the right turn lane of Congress Street, turning right and going outbound on Maplewood Ave. The operator of the vehicle had a green light to proceed right on the intersection. At the time, one of the leading contributing factors to the crash, upon the officer's determination and investigation, was solar glare. if anybody knows, if you're at that intersection this time of year looking down Islington Street or west, you have the potential for solar glare. And in this instance, that's what the officer determined to be a contributing factor, was that solar glare. As the vehicle was turning right onto Maplewood Ave, there was a number of pedestrians crossing Maplewood Ave from Islington towards Congress in the crosswalk. They had a cross signal to cross, and the vehicle had struck the 8-year-old. The 8-year-old was thankfully not seriously injured, not transported, and the operator of the vehicle pulled over, stayed on scene, gave all the information, was amenable to the investigation, and provided everything on scene, and the investigation concluded from there. That is the summary as to what happened with that crash.
So the light was green when the crosswalk was on,
The light for the motorist?
turning.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my issue. Thank you.
Okay.
And the reason that's not in the report is because it was this month.
Correct.
I know.
And our
I know,
reports
but I
are.
was asking because people have asked me about it.
Yep.
Okay, so
It's out in the community, but it hasn't been in the paper. There has been nothing about it. So I think to clarify that is, thank you.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So moving on to item C, response to resident concerns regarding Chevrolet Avenue sidewalks and speeding, Gallagher's Place crosswalk on Islington Street, and traffic speeds on Miller Avenue near Spring Street.
Mr. Chairman, some information is in the packet on this. The issue of speeds on Chevrolet Ave came up a few years ago, and we did speed measurements on there, and it was, I think they were in the low 20s. I think the minutes are in the packet. We found that it wasn't a speeding issue, but there was a speed limit of 30 miles an hour out there that was posted. So in order to hopefully discourage people from driving the actual speed limit, the speed limit signs were removed. And that's one where it would be more appropriate to probably lower it to 25. The data supports a speed limit of 25. But the speeds are actually lower than 25. So that's something else that can be addressed during the speed limit review.
In addition, a sidewalk was installed on that
Yes.
section of roadway.
Yep, since that time.
All right, thank you.
The item at Gallagher's, as part of the Islington Street reconstruction, there was a median island placed in the middle of Islington Street. So the crossing from Gallagher's over to Plaza 800 is now, you can do it in 2 stages. You get to the median island and wait for a gap in the other direction coming out. So with that added assistance for pedestrians, we don't see the need for the RFB at that location. That's the first time I've heard of an issue being able to cross the street at the location since we've made those improvements. But, we can certainly monitor it and keep an eye on it and see if it continues to be an issue.
Okay.
And on Miller Ave, we did collect speeds out there. I think we referenced that in the speed limit presentation. It's posted at 25. The actual speed defaults to 30 because it's not in Chapter 7 ordinance. And the speed measurements we took on Miller at that area were in line with the actual speed limit of 30 miles an hour. It's a little bit above the 25, but it's in line with the actual 30 limit. So that's something else we can address during our speed limit review.
Okay, Erica?
It looks like the information in the packet that the speed data on Miller was from 2016.
Yes.
I feel like behaviors have changed considerably, somewhat universally since 2016, and I wasn't sure if we could get updated data there.
We can go out and collect speed data again, sure, that's not a problem.
I don't know if I observe a ton of speeding there. I'm trying to think about that, but I'm not sure I want to make decisions based on 2016 data.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a motion, Eric, or is that?
It was informational. I mean, we can.
No,
Okay.
staff can go ahead and do that.
All right. And then D, downtown parking study status update.
Ben?
Taking him from the comfortable chairs.
There's a gleam in Eric's eye.
There he goes.
Ben.
Good evening, everybody. Ben Fletcher, Parking Director. Quick update on the parking study. We did select a winning vendor, and we're in the process of beginning contract negotiations with that vendor. Once we reach those negotiations, it'll be updated on the website, and in the event we are unable to do so, the next prevailing winning vendor would be selected to start that process.
Any questions from the committee? Great, thank you for the update.
Have a good day.
And the last item, I think, is Bartlett Street at Thornton Street, update on temporary roundabout trial.
Mr. Chairman, we've obtained the items, purchased the items necessary to construct the mini roundabout and the islands leading up to it. At this point, we're waiting for the asphalt plants to open up, which should be mid to late April, because that's what we'll use to construct the center circle of the roundabout with. So, at that point, as it gets closer, we'll have another update at next month's meeting, and hopefully shortly after that, we would be ready to install it.
Eric, the question was raised during the comment period, what the cost of that was. Do you have off the top of your head what we're looking at?
Well, while I don't have the cost yet of the asphalt, I would estimate the total project cost at about $20,000 for the material.
And a lot of the materials are reusable.
Yes, yeah, all the curbing that will be used to form the islands and the center circle will be reusable.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. One of the homes on that corner has a guardrail. I don't know how long it's been there, but it must have been because a car came up on the sidewalk or into their front yard. And I'm wondering if neighbors have requested that for all four corners, the houses for all four corners.
No, but their other neighbors are concerned that the one at the other corner, who will have traffic directed towards her, is certainly concerned about how this is going to go. So we will be monitoring it very closely during the trial.
I know. I just saw the guardrail there, and
Yeah,
I thought.
I think the guardrail is before there was a four-way stop and the traffic came up at a good speed and made that left turn onto Thornton, and would go too fast.
Or the front.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been there a long time.
Thank you.
All right, miscellaneous. I'm not seeing any. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.